The alignment of planets that you see behind me, where we have the two largest planets, Jupiter and Saturn, in exact alignment right now, and Pluto, the farthest of the planets, in that same alignment. This is a huge paradigm shift that we're going through right now, not only in the world, but in ourselves. We are in a moment of spiritual wisdom and shifting the understanding. That's what those planets mean. Jupiter means wisdom, Saturn is a structure, and Pluto is spirit. Spiritual wisdom, structure. It's kind of like, it's a time where we would sort of like give up on our old belief system and move into a higher level of understanding. This is the perfect time to let go of old patterns, old belief systems in particular, and discover exactly who you are, where you've been, and where you'd like to go, and how to manifest that reality. Hi, I'm Dean Price with Astrology Today. I've been an astrologer for many, many decades. Originally, my background was mathematics and psychology, but in my early 20s, I happened to visit a friend who was married to an astrologer who did my chart. Kind of blew my mind at the time. And so I immediately immersed myself in the study of astrology. I studied every astrological tradition I could get my hands on, including Egyptian, Mayan, Chinese, Western, and kind of put it all together, organized all the information, and began practicing astrology. I've taught many people astrology, taught many, many classes, and some of my students have done very well with it, including one of my students wrote the book, Astrology for Yourself, which is the #1 book on Oprah Winfrey's list of astrology books, particularly for beginning astrology. That book is completely based on my system of astrology that I developed with all my studies back in the day. And since then, I've learned many, many more things, and I'm working on another more advanced book right now. When I first got my astrology chart done myself, when I was in my 20s, it was like a huge revelation to me, because when I was just graduating from college, I had been studying mathematics and psychology, but I wasn't really sure what I would like to do with that knowledge, and so I just headed out on the road to a sort of a journey of self-discovery. And one of the first things that happened was I spent 3 weeks with an astrologer who was married to one of my high school friends, and started reading a few books, got my chart read, and it thoroughly transformed my understanding of myself and who I was and what I might like to do with my life. And so I then spent a year or two in, almost constant study of astrology. I mainly learned by observing every day where the planets were and what I was feeling myself, what was happening in my life, what was happening in the world of, current events. And it was astonishing to me how good a tool it was for understanding who we are and what's going on at any given time in our lives. I studied also a lot of Carl Jung and found out that he, according to his daughter, did an astrology chart for virtually every one of his clients, and as a way to understand what was going on in their psyche. And it's the best tool I've ever found for getting an insight into what makes people tick. So one of the next things that happened in my studies after doing astrology for several years, I kind of started thinking, this is really great for understanding and getting insight into what's going on with a person that I'm talking to. And it's sort of like giving you an x-ray of what's going on inside of them. And I realized, it would be like going to a doctor and getting an x-ray and them saying, well, here's what's going on with you. You have, this problem in your lungs and this problem in your stomach. And wow, that must really hurt. And good luck with that. So I thought, well, what could we do to actually help people, heal or change or reprogram themselves from whatever the pattern was. So I started studying polarity therapy, which is based on astrology and the astrological zones of the body and a form of hands-on healing using that model. So I then immersed myself in that study. I started a training program called the Colorado Institute of Energy Work, where we taught polarity therapy and other forms of hands-on healing. And in that process, as I was working on people, I realized that the planets in the chart were literally the chakras of the body in the exact same order, that we were a perfect microcosm of the universe around us. And in fact, astrology is based on the idea that what's outside of us is a mirror of what's inside of us. And I realized how precise that was, and that I could do a chart of a person, see where, their more stressful planetary alignments and aspects were, and do hands-on healing using those specific points based on a person's own chart. And so that I was super excited when I realized that. It was more like a download that I received while I remember working on a specific person at the time with my hands on them. I go, oh my God, the chakras and the planets are in the exact same order in the body. And so what you're seeing right next to me is a kind of an image of the correspondences between the planets and chakras. And this is what I use when I teach people astrology. This is the model I use when I'm working with a person to understand them, but then I also typically will do what I call spirit touch, which is hands-on healing based on a person's astrology chart, so that whatever's going on in their chart, we don't have to just, feel like we're stuck with that. We can change it. We can reprogram it. And so that's exactly what I do. I was so excited about discovering this, and, I thought, wow, I've made some kind of a whole new discovery, a new astrology can be born out of this. And then it wasn't even that long, maybe a few weeks or a month or so after I realized the correspondence between the planets and the chakras and how they were in the exact same order, I started reading a book by Jose Arguelles called The Mayan Factor. And I think this was back in the 80s that he wrote that book. I actually met Jose. And he was the one that popularized the idea of the shift of ages in 2012. He popularized the Mayan calendar for Westerners. And on page 121 of his book was this image. He didn't explain the image. He didn't say anything about it. There it was. And I was reading the book. I looked at this image and I went, oh my God. There are the planets in the exact same order in the heavens, corresponding to the exact same chakras that I had downloaded myself. So it was kind of a humbling experience. I realized I wasn't the original inventor of this system of astrology, but had downloaded the information from the same source that the Mayans did. So it was good because it was a confirmation that I was on the right track. And so I just continued using that and developing what I now call Spirit Touch, a method of healing and reprogramming based on a person's astrology chart. Okay, so as I continued to develop and refine my understanding of the correspondences of the planets and the chakras, I realized that virtually everything is a mirror of everything else. That's why you can read a person's palm, you can read the iris of the eye, you can read almost anything that's around a person in their environment. You can read anything. You could create virtually any system because everything mirrors everything else. This is all a hologram, and every part contains the whole, and the whole is represented within every part. So I realized that the numerology of the planets shed a great deal of light on each dimension of ourself represented by each chakra. So you could say above us is a halo, a circle, a zero that represents nothingness, and that crown chakra at the top points to space, which is a vast, infinite nothingness. And then that's the zero dimension. And then if you go down one chakra to the third eye, you see dots of light. That's what's going on in our mind. That's the visual center. It's made up of dots. And a dot is the number one. So that's another dimension. We are multidimensional beings. And as we go through the chakras, down the front and then up the back using this microcosmic orbit that I'm showing you, which I learned from Mantak Chia, who I brought in to teach when he released his book back in the 80s called Taoist Secrets of Love. I learned that there was more to the chakras than just straight up and down the central channel. There was an orbit that went down the front and up the back. And if you follow those, you get different dimensions in following the numbers in the exact order. So for example, go down one more chakra to the throat chakra based on the number 2. If you're going back and forth between yin and yang, A and B, up and down or whatever, you're creating vibration. So I've got the symbol of yin and yang, and you can see that it's actually a sine wave, a vibratory pattern. So the duality is actually vibration, and sound creates vibration, which then changes the physical world. That's how you attract things into manifestation. So there became the outlines of a complete system of understanding the dimensions that are contained within ourself and mirrored in every planetary orbit. Each one adds a new dimension to our experience. So we've got nothingness, we've got dots of light, we've got vibration and sound, and you just keep going through each planet. You add another point, you add another dimension, and that dimension describes that experience. So this is a chart of that, and I'll be making videos to get into more depth of understanding all of the different dimensions of ourself represented by the planets and mirrored in the chakras. Okay, so when I work with a person, I start with looking at their chart. So I basically, like I said, have a kind of blueprint of their life, a kind of X-ray, you might say, of who they are and what their patterns are. And some of those patterns might be painful or might be dysfunctional, or might be just leftover things from their past lives or their childhood that they really would be better off leaving behind. And so we're not stuck forever with whatever patterns we may have created throughout our lifetimes and throughout our childhood and the other parts of our life. We can reprogram those, just as science is discovering today that you can reprogram your DNA. This is kind of like DNA. It's like a computer program. And astrology is a language. It's a mathematical, geometric language. And it describes the way the person came into this life when you're looking at their natal chart. The transits are described by the current positions of the planets, and how those interact with each other gives you a picture of what's going on in that person's life. But then, you start noticing, well, they keep having the same relationship that they had with their mother over and over again. And maybe we'd be better off with a different pattern. And so then doing putting hands on maybe Venus, the heart chakra, connected to what it maybe something is opposite that, like the moon or Mars. Like right now, Venus is opposite Mars, and that creates tension between the heart chakra and the pelvic chakra. And so that might be like relationships where people don't touch each other or something like that. And so that would be a good pattern to change. And so that can be done by putting one hand on the heart chakra, one hand on the pelvic chakra in the case of what's going on right now in the world. And then running energy to connect them. And then I always work with your spirit guides or angels or deities or whatever you believe in or would like to request assistance from in changing the program. And then it's also a good idea to state a new pattern in present time and express gratitude for the change, and make sure that it's something that feels good, makes you happy, etc. So we do that. And then the sacred geometry itself is a powerful meditation technique that you can add to this whole process by visualizing or viewing these symbols in relation to the chakras that they represent. There are manifestation techniques that use simple geometric forms like the ones you see on this diagram here, whereby within a short period of time of doing it regularly in terms of visualizing or viewing these geometric forms, one can balance the chakras, balance the centers, so that the things that you're requesting or focusing on or expressing gratitude for can relatively easily and effortlessly arise and manifest in your world. So I combine a lot of different techniques in my work with people to help them understand and change their patterns and manifest the world that they would prefer to experience. Well, I've got a website called astrologyhoroscopetoday.com, where you can make an appointment for a session. I'm offering new clients who I haven't worked with before a free 15-minute session, so you can experience my work. I'm also doing videos like on the new moon, which happens to be the day I'm recording this today. I am doing weekly horoscopes to understand what's going on in the world right now. And it's also a great way to learn astrology if you compare what's going on, just as I did when I was learning, what's going on in the stars compared to what's going on in your life or what's going on in the world. Very instructive. And actually you get a much clearer understanding of astrology, because a lot of traditional astrology people are still repeating basically principles of medieval astrology when people were not quite so aware as they are now. So you can compare what you believe about astrology to what's actually really going on in the world and get a much deeper understanding. Yeah, if you'd like to make an appointment for a free 15-minute session where I can look at your astrology chart and see what the primary patterns are and what's going on right now, you can go to my website, astrologyhoroscopetoday.com, and then just click on the calendar and pick a date and time that you'd like to have a free 15-minute session. So my normal rates are $200 an hour or $50 for a 15-minute session. And so that's what I'm offering for free, is that normally $50 session.